Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to our spotlights that we're doing. Today, we're going to be talking to the Pendyrus Male Choir from Wales, all the way from Wales. But before we get to that, I want to introduce myself and present myself to others. By now, you know me. I am Janice Sykes-Ross. I am the executive director here at the Paul Robeson House and Museum. And boy, do we have a lot going on to celebrate the 125th birthday. And we're going to be talking about some of those activities today. We just finished a weekend of exciting activities. Not only was it Easter weekend, but it was also the celebration of Robeson's birthday on Sunday, April the 9th. So that is the actual day that he was born. And we were in Harlem, New York, where he spent a great deal of time in Harlem, New York. And we went to his family church, Mother AME Zion Church. And that was a wonderful experience. And then we went over to Columbia University, where he graduated from law school. So those are the things that have already happened. What is coming up is tomorrow, we have a Black essay contest where the students have written an essay about Paul Robeson. And that's going to be presented right here at the house at 4949 Walnut. You want to be here. We want to support our youth. And then we have our youth docents that will be giving the tours here. So that's tomorrow, Wednesday, April the 12th, and it's going to start at 4 o'clock. And so you want to be here and you want to be on time. And then on April the 14th, which is Friday, and I'm told that the weather is going to be beautiful on Friday, you're going to want to be here as well for our street renaming. We are renaming the street at 50th and Walnut and the 4900 block to Paul Robeson Way. And we have so many vendors, so much activity that is going to be going on that day. The street will be closed, 50th Street. And so you can come out, you can enjoy the sunshine, and you can certainly celebrate with us. For more information on all of our activities, you can go to our website, paulrobesonhouse.org. And we will hear it again throughout this televised live stream, but it is paulrobesonhouse.org. And then to close out the week, which is Saturday, April the 15th, we will have our closing gala. Now, it's not too late to get a ticket for the closing gala. But before that, on the evening of April the 14th, we do have a very provocative panel discussion that will feature Solomon Jones. It will feature Frederica Newton, who is the former wife of Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party. And we're also going to have Michael Africa from MOVE. And as our moderator, we're going to have Michael Cord. And we just learned today that we're going to have WURD broadcasting live. So that is the evening of the 14th. And all of that is going to be at the historic Belmont Mansion. Again, the tickets for these remaining events, you can go to our website, paulrobesonhouse.org. And the closing gala, I think I mentioned, we're going to feature Gina Belafonte. We're also going to feature Sweet Honey and the Rock. So there's lots more. Go to the website. But we want to move right into today. And one of the featured performers at our gala is the Welsh Male Choir. And we have them with us today. And we're going to learn some intimate things about the organization. So you're going to want to stay tuned for this. Okay, so we're going to move into our program. I want to present to others and introduce Sherry L. Howard. Sherry is a storyteller, a writer, a researcher. She has a long writing career. She was a reporter. She says was a reporter. She is always going to be a reporter at a newspaper in her hometown in Macon, Georgia. She was in Tampa, Florida. She was in Raleigh, North Carolina. And she was a reporter right here in Philadelphia. Before leaving her final job at the Philadelphia Inquirer, she began going to auction houses and researching and studying African American art. And Sherry has put together the most amazing collection of art. And she was doing this so often and at so wonderfully that she actually published a book. And her book is called Auction Finds. Her book is Art with a Heart. And it tells you how to find great art and learn about artists at a very reasonable price. So you want to definitely check out her book, and all of that information is on our website. Okay. Now we're going to talk about our featured guests. Gentlemen, it is so wonderful to have you all here. Let me introduce to you Graham Clark. He is the General Secretary of the Pendyrus Male Choir, having been elected in 2019. He came right in the middle of the pandemic. He joined the choir in 1990. And for those 32 years, he has sung second bass. He served as publicity manager, and for 6 years as assistant general secretary for 12 years. So thank you, Graham. Welcome. Next, we have Sorrell Jones and the choir's archivist. He is now an honorary member. He joined the choir in 1958 and has served as its stage manager, worked as a manager and on committee, and assisted in publicity. He has also been deeply involved in arranging the annual gala concert in 2008. He published a history of the choir titled History in the Making. And I think you can preview some of that history of the choir on our website. You got to go to our website, paulrobesonhouse.org. I'm going to keep saying it. Spanning those years from his beginning in May 24th, 1924 to 2008. Welcome to you, Cyril. And then we have, last but not least, is Jeffrey Hunt. Jeffrey spent 15 years in the Dallas Male Choir in the early 1990s before moving further south and joining Pendyrus. He listened to several male choirs before choosing Pendyrus because it stood out to him among the rest. He travels 30 miles for 1 hour each way to attend the choir rehearsals. So that's how devoted he is to the choir. During the pandemic, he volunteered to assist with the choir's online activities, setting up Zoom rehearsals and taking charge of the social media pages and website. Welcome, gentlemen, and we now turn it over to you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm very, very happy to be here and have the opportunity to interview Graham and Cyril and Jeff, who all have this, whose choir and all the male choirs and will have this long connection to Paul Robeson and have a long connection, period. So I'm going to get started since we started a little late. And I'm going to put the question out there and I'll let you three decide who wants to answer. But first I want to start by asking, when was Pendyrus formed and what's precipitated it?
Yeah, well,
Cyril now.
yeah, okay. Yeah, it was inaugurated in May of 1924, 4 years before the coming of Paul Robeson into the Rhondda Valley. And at that time, the working conditions of the miners and the money that they were receiving was pittance. And so consequently, many of those men were out of work. And two of them decided, well, we must use our spare time by creating a new male voice choir. And they first got together in the Miners' Federation hut that overlooked the colliery where they had been employed. And ironically enough, that night, the power station in the colliery burnt down, and from the light of that fire, it lit up a railway signal box that said Pendyrus. And so they were thinking of the name, and they said, that's what it's got to be. It's got to be more Welsh than the Tylerstown where the choir comes from, and it has to be more romantic, and so it was adopted that name. And the first rehearsals took place in the nearby Ebenezer Chapel, because a lot of the male voice choirs and choirs generally actually started their time in the chapels and the churches of the valleys. And so within 2 weeks of the organization becoming a choir, it grew to something like about 170 choristers, outgrew the vestry in the chapel, and they moved across into the local school, and from there on in, it moved on to become one of the premier choirs in Wales. Little did they think these two out of work miners, and their names were Benjamin Jones, who was an accomplished accompanist. He was an engine driver below ground in the local quarry, and his partner was I can't think of, but anyway, he was a collier in the quarry. And so little did they think at that time they were going to create something that was going to take the name of Tylerstown, Pendyrus, and the Rhondda on a worldwide journey, which the choir has achieved, traveling New Zealand, Australia, the continent of Europe, and many other places on their travels as they went along. And so from a situation of poverty, and this choir has grown to be what it is today. Poverty and strife was a difficult time for the miners of the valleys at that time. No work, no pay, and difficult to live, really. And so that's how the choir was born, out of strife and poverty, and has gone on to become one of the premier choirs in Wales.
So were some of the workers, miners from Pendyrus, that area, among those who marched, I guess, to London, and were there among the ones who Paul Robeson heard singing?
Yeah, okay. The march took place in October of 1928, yeah. And it was made up of miners from the village of Mardy, which is the head of the Rhondda, of Watstown, midway, and Porth at the end of the valley. And they were the group of miners that actually did this walk. Took them 6 days, sleeping in hedges, in farm barns, until he arrived outside the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane, where Paul was appearing in Showboat there. And it seems that he was introduced to the men outside who were singing by one of the staff in the theatre. And he came out, he listened to their problems, he listened to them singing, and he said, I can do nothing at the moment, but I promise I will come back and I will do everything in my power to assist you. He then took them all to a restaurant, I believe it was a Lion's Corner House restaurant, to give them a meal, the first meal they'd had for well over a week. And then on to Trafalgar Square in London, where they met up with a miners' leader. And between them, they made sure that they had a bed for the night, and that they weren't going to walk back home. They were going to be returned back by train the following day. And that's what happened. But when he arrived at the railway station, Paul and A.J. Cook, who was the miners' leader, had filled one of the carriages of that train with clothes, with shoes, and with food to take back to Wales. So Paul's introduction into Wales was actually in the Rhondda, because true to his word, in January of 1929, he came back. He came back with two of his colleagues, and he took a train to Cardiff Central Railway Station, and he was met on that platform by the miners that had done the walk and the miners' leader of that time, a man by the name of Harry Pollitt. And they met him on the station, and they brought him on a train up to the village of Anisir, where Paul spent 2 nights.
Mm-hmm.
And they took him there because it was the only house in the village that was big enough to cater for guests, and it had an inside bathroom and toilet. And so Paul spent his first 2 nights in Anisir with Harry Pollitt, the miners' leader. And I'll conclude by an interesting story, because there's a lady, and she has done an interview for American television, actually, of Martha Edwards, who Paul had stayed in her Uncle Owen's house. And she'd been taken to the house on the morning after Paul had arrived. And she walked into the room and she saw Paul, and she'd never seen, and this is her words, never seen a black man before. Mm-hmm. And she ran out and apparently hid behind the grandfather clock. But he went out, scooped her up in his arms, carried her in and put her on the arm of a chair and sang to her.
Okay.
And that was then a lifetime friendship between Martha and Paul, who over the years built up the memorabilia, everything she could find on Paul Robeson, and in recent years she donated it to the local authority. And there is a room in one of the theatres here, a Paul Robeson room, with all the artifacts that she had collected over the years.
Okay.
There we are. That's the start of Paul coming to the Rhondda Valley first, before he branched out throughout the whole of South Wales. But yes, it was accepted, I suppose, that amongst all those miners, there could well have been some of those who actually sang with Pendyrus.
Okay.
Because Pendyrus by then had become a big choir, and so the Watstown contingent also had a big choir. So we can only assume that amongst those, there could well have been some members of Pendyrus as part of that march.
Okay.
So
now I want to get into the Welsh choirs. I know they've been around for more than a century, and so and from what I've read, the choirs are about more than just singing. It's about history, it's about tradition, and also about pride. Talk a little bit about the deeper significance of male choirs, to even among you, Graham, and also Jeff. Is it more than just singing?
Yes, it's a great deal more than singing. We are proud, actually, to turn around and say, and very often state that it's a family, a Pendyrus family. And when members get in trouble, be it health-wise or whatever, there's always a band of guys that'll come around and support and help. So and additionally with the families, actually, we practice twice a week. We, on average, we have 2 concerts a month. So if you do the calculation for that, that's a lot of time out of the house. So what you do need is a very committed partner, wife. Maybe they should be committed, but I couldn't. I'm sure Jeff will agree, and I'm sure Sarah will. You can't do the job without the total support of your wife or partner, whatever it is. And also, you know that when you go, there is the support of the choir. Sometimes, I mean, in administration that I'm involved in, or mostly involved in, is that one thing you can be sure, you can't please everybody all the time. But invariably, it's a democratic organization. Every year we put ourselves forward. It becomes very onerous that you have to carry forward the tradition of, as Cyril brought out there, when the choir was named. And one of our former musical directors had the conversation whenever starting a concert, after the initial song, would get round and say, of course, the choir is named after that signal box that Cyril referred to, Pendyrus. And he said, some people think, and he would turn around and point to maybe 80, 90 choristers on stage, they all still think that we rehearse in a small signal box. So, but that was his opening gambit, and it takes it forward year after year. So it's part of the fiber, if you like, of the choir. Everyone in the choir knows it. But the organization is very strong. It's been through times but it hasn't been. It fluctuates. But currently we're about 90, 95, 96 members on the books.
And you mentioned
And
age.
every year we lose some and we gain some. So.
And also you mentioned ages. I want to come back to Jeff about my question about the deeper significance, and also you mentioned that the ages are from like 24 to 89. So it's a wide range of ages.
Yeah, and when it comes to the younger contingent, lots of male voice choirs are struggling to recruit. And at one point in time, we had 20 people under the age of 35, which was a significant proportion of the choir, balancing out the older generation. But I'm not sure which of the two sections were the more rowdy after the concerts at the pub. Yeah, as Cyril said, it's the family, and I said come back to the lockdown, which is how I got involved in it. We decided, we can't not get together. So, twice a week, we ended up organizing Zoom meetings where our conductor would play songs that he wanted us to get to learn over that lockdown. I'd record them, I'd make up, tracks for those who couldn't attend that particular day, and we distribute those. And, when it came to getting back together to in-person rehearsals, I think we were the first choir in Wales to organise an in-person concert. Actually, it's one that I organised just down the road for myself, so one that I could walk to, not having to drive to. Yeah, it's a family, and it's the tradition side of things.
So it was a family. So when you were sort of apart during the pandemic, we just sort of very, very happy to see each other at that first concert afterwards. Did you miss each other?
I would say so. Learning over a Zoom and learning in rehearsals with limited numbers, because that's what we started back, is not the same as performing to a live audience and getting that reaction from our audience. And that is part of the buzz of singing with a male voice choir. You see the smiling faces of people in front of you who appreciate the work that you've done to entertain them. And of course, there's the pub afterwards.
The pub afterwards.
Just to highlight the extremes, that first concert, because of various things, I think we were 45 that staged. That was that first concert after lockdown. Of course, the audience, although quite reasonable, but the audience were the same. About people were apprehensive about coming back after COVID, and particularly to areas where close congregation, where you're all together after 2 years almost. but it progressed, and we had a very, very busy 2021, and it culminates if you just behind Jeff, if you see that line of good-looking men, particularly at the far right, where I am. There we sang in front of 75 or 77,000
Yeah.
people at the National Stadium for the rugby game. So we sing from extremes, and that now it's back to its brilliant best now.
So Sarah, let me ask you a question about the origins of male choirs in Wales. The ones that during Paul Robeson time were made up of miners. You know, why do you think that was the case? And I assume that by now you don't have a lot of miners in the choir, but you know, why miners? What I mean, was it so hard in the minds that they needed to you know, express themselves in song afterwards?
Yeah, you know,
what I picked up, sorry, sir. I just what I've picked up is that during the when it starts off, there were the men far outweighed the number of women in the valleys, because of course everybody moved there because it was like the Klondike. I mean, the coal mining at the time. So there wasn't a great deal to do. Non-conformism, the churches, etc., where they sang, and it didn't take long for them to group together. It was a hobby and something for them to do. Sorry, sir, I cut across you slightly there. So, but and that. I mean, back in the day, Paul Robeson day, as Cyril said, they were Pendyrus were 130, 140, 150 strong, and all from. I checked on some of the minute books, and I found that they were the members of Pendyrus. I think it was 1932, were totally from, if you like, three or four villages, which are Ferndale, Tylerstown, Pontegwaith, and Wattstown. There was one guy who was not from the village, that at least that I could see, and he was from a place called Llanesbol, which is just about 3 miles over the top, and he was a soloist. So that's how parochial, that's how tight it became, and very much. Sorry, Cyril.
No, I'm just going to say, Graham, that historically, the reason for the choirs forming, not just here in Tylers, but throughout the whole of South Wales, was the enforced employment the men were faced with. They had nothing. There was no other entertainment. So this was the recreation that they found to come together so that they could make use of their time away from their place of work. So historically, I did mention that a lot of these originally came from the chapels and the churches where the choirs were performing there, and moved on into what I've mentioned now about the coming together of the out of work men, and this was due to the enforced time on their hands. They needed something to occupy themselves, and that's what they did. And ironically enough, Graham almost touched on it, Pendyrus has never stopped singing in the whole of its history, which will be 100 years next year. They were one of the very few choirs that actually continued right through the Second World War. And they were in great demand then. And I can, with all honesty, tell you that in their annual concert in 1942, they staged a concert with 153 choristers. So they continued right through the whole of the Second World War, and have never stopped ever since. And There are many, many other choirs, unfortunately, had to disband because of the war years, but Pendyrus kept going.
So I'm going to ask, so why do you think Pendyrus and Humbach and some of the others have Imperial to have endured? Why have male choirs in Wales been so popular and have been around so long? What's the secret?
I think it's inbred, actually. The way I look upon it is, particularly in my younger days, when I joined in 1958, there were quite a lot of young people in that choir, and we came there for the love of music. And, what better way to learn music than to do it with a group of other men? You learned the music, you were taught how to read the music, and you enjoyed being together, and not just in the rehearsal room, but when you went away and you did your concerts. And I want to just take up something you mentioned about the street naming of Paul Robeson Street, which is coming off this weekend. Ironically enough, there is a street in America named Pendyrus Avenue after a concert tour the choir did. I think it was about 1984, and they went to Philadelphia, and they were honored by the city elders. They were all given the freedom of the city, and they named the street after the choir. And they also named the signal box on the defunct now Mason-Dixon line. They named the signal box Pendyrus.
It's in a town called Delta, and it's
Delta.
Pennsylvania, just
Delta,
on the border.
Delta, PA?
Pennsylvania. Delta, PA, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Didn't know that.
The last time we were there, I think, was 2002.
Where were you? In United States, or in Pennsylvania, or in the United States?
Well, we went from Harrisburg,
okay,
where we actually stayed. We did a concert in Delta. Then we went to Georgia. I get it now. What's the capital of Georgia?
Atlanta.
That's it. That's the place. We went to Atlanta, then we went up north, or we went north to Minneapolis, and then to Ohio, and I've forgotten the name of the place in Ohio, and then Detroit.
So one of the things that you mentioned was these band of guys, and we had chatted about like this before. There are no women in the male choirs.
You keep talking about women, Shelley. No, we get one to play the piano now and again.
Has there been a movement by Welsh women to join some of the Welsh choirs or to join Pendyrus? Talk a little bit about the lack of women in Welsh choirs.
I don't think there is a lack of women in choirs. I think they have their own choirs in their own right, and we'll be singing with one in our concert coming up on this Friday. Yes. I think it's being from Wales, there's a respect of traditions, and I don't think women would want to come and sing in a male voice choir. There are loads of mixed choirs in the area. There are loads of female-only choirs in the area, and depending on your singing preferences, you'll either go for a mixed or a single-sex choir. Personally, I sing apart from Pendyrus. I sing with a mixed choir as well.
Okay.
Actually two. But
okay.
Yeah, it's I'm quite busy. But I said so. The tradition of male singing is the one that Wales is most noted for.
Right.
There are some really good female choirs in the area.
So tell me briefly a little bit about how each of you ended up in a male choir. What's your background? How did you get there? How did you get there?
Go on, you got there first.
I was in first. Yeah. So basically, I used to work in an office, and one of the guys who was working on the shop floor used to sing with Pendyrus, and they'd organised some sort of open evening, and across the car park they put a marquee up, and Dowlais Male Voice Choir, I was singing with the local choir at the time. They came down, and then they were on a recruitment drive as well. So this guy kind of dragged me along and said, come and have a listen. And said, at school I was not interested in language or not interested in music. I ended up spending 15 years with Dowlais Male Voice. And I moved. I said, when I started looking around, there was only one choir on the radar after seeing dozens of them, and that was Pendyrus. And so that comes with the transport, the time I spend. And I said there are people who travel further than I do. So as was mentioned earlier, at one point in time, all of the choristers came from 3 villages. Currently, I don't consider Pendyrus to be a local choir anymore. We're a regional choir. And the catchment area is 40, 50 miles plus. We've even got one guy crosses the bridge twice a week from England. So it's a significant catchment area for the choir, but that catchment area says volumes about the choir itself, where people will travel to sing with a really good choir.
Graham, you're not about to say something?
Purely and simply, it was just some friends of mine that came over to join Pendyrus, because back in the late 80s, Pendyrus had a very high profile reputation. There was no doubt, and one would always wonder, would I be good enough to get in to be allowed to get in? The MD was a legend, the legend that was Glyn Jones, and my 2 friends went and joined, and I thought, well, I can sing better than one of them. No names, but I can sing better than one, and he made it. So I thought, well, I'll go over then. And I came over the following year. They joined in 89 and I joined in 90. And things just happened so quickly that I actually went on stage in place St. David's Hall in Cardiff 6 weeks later. And the only reason was because we were only singing 3 items, and they were the 3 items that were introduced the night I joined, the first of the year. So I knew them as much as anyone else. And all of a sudden, I'm on stage, and I remember it to this day that actually I don't think I walked off, I floated off, because we only went on for the second half, and we did At the River was one, The Last Words of David was another, and another, can't recall it, and the anthem. So that was my knowledge of, but I floated off and I said to my beloved, that's what I'm going to do from now on. So if it's a Saturday night, sorry dear, you're going to be without me. And that was March 1990. And
So Cyril,
they accepted me anyway.
all right. So Cyril, what about you? Now you the 1958. I'd like for you to talk too in your answer about being at the 1958 Transatlantic.
My knowledge of Pendyrus goes back to 1944, actually, and I think I've said this in my biog. As an 8-year-old, sitting with my parents at home, listening to this sound that came out this box that they called a wireless, and it was the sound of this choir. I'd never heard it before, and they were performing a piece of music called "Crossing the Bar," the words written by Lord Tennyson. And I thought, gosh, I'd not heard that before, but one day I want to be part of that. And so it took me another 14 years to buck up the courage to go up to Tylerstown and take the dreaded voice test to become a member of Pendyrus Choir. And that was in 1958. And I've never, ever turned my back on that choir. There have been occasions when I had to stand down as a singing member for work reasons, for health reasons, but my love of the choir remained as it is today. And so I've been part of that choir with every musical director that has been there from the very beginning. There's only been ever 6. And so the founder musical director was there when I joined, and I'm doing my part the best I can in 2023 with the present day musical director, Ian Jones. So I went through the whole issue of musical directors as I've gone along, and it's in my blood. You know, I'm part of this organization. I can't leave it. And even though I'm limited, incidentally, Graham, I'm 87. 87, so I get it towards the top end of that. But yeah, you know, I'm still able to do what I can to help Graham and others, you know, to enhance the choir the best I can. I do a lot of publicity when I can for them. I write up their programs for the concerts and get them printed, and so it's gone on, you know. So my love of the choir has remained since 1958, and is still there as the first day I joined.
So talk about the 1958 concert with Paul Robeson.
Okay, well, that was, Shirley, that was the most emotional experience I ever had. I wasn't part of any choir then, but I was in the audience. And of course, it was the South Wales Miners who set up this transatlantic telephone link with Paul in the United States. And I can remember quite vividly, the evening was introduced by a man called Will Painter, who was the South Wales president of the National Union of Mine Workers. And he spoke to Paul across that transatlantic link to introduce him on how the evening was going to work out. And he emphasized that the South Wales Miners would always be fighting to get his passport returned so that he could come back again to Wales and join them physically. And of course, Paul responded, and I believe he had 2 of his grandchildren with him that night. David and Susan, I believe, were the 2 grandchildren. And he had another of his activists who was the accompanist. Was it Alan Booth? He was the accompanist for Paul.
It might have been, I can't remember. His regular accompanist was Lawrence Brown. I can't remember if Lawrence was with him that night. It could have been.
It was that night. I'm almost certain Alan Booth.
Okay.
And of course, he sang, I think it was 5 pieces of music. And I can recall it. Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? I think it was one. And This Little Light of Mine, All Men Are Brothers. And that was from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And Baby Sleeping. And he ended up, of course, he sang the Welsh National Anthem, but in English. And they had a conversation between one another, which was quite fascinating, because when you think of the quality of that line that night in 1958, when telephone links weren't all that clever anyway. And then, of course, that night in the Eisteddfod, which is the annual Eisteddfod, the South Wales Miners year, the winning choir of the chief male competition that night was Treorchy. And so Treorchy were invited to respond and sing across that link to Paul, and they sang Adele Nile, the Golden Harp. And I think Jeff has put that on that video that you're going to have, or you might already have, and they sang it back. And then I can recall, I was so emotional that night, and I'm still emotional even today, thinking about it. And of course, we all ended up by singing "We'd Keep It Welcome in the Hillsides," and Paul joined in, and yeah, it was something really special. And you know, I still got a copy of that transatlantic link in my archive.
Okay.
And it is recorded on an old vinyl recording and now transferred onto a CD, and I guard it with as part of my treasure. So yeah, I was there that night, very emotional, even today emotional. And what can I say? You know, it captivated me. I was completely overwhelmed by the experience, and so proud to be part of that audience that night. So, you know, it's still there.
It's just wonderful hearing this story and being here listening to someone who was sitting in the audience that night. I read a lot about it, but I'm loving this story that you're giving. Now, one of the things I see in the Pendyrus repertoire are spirituals. Have you always done spirituals? And that, you know, Paul Robeson was known for his spirituals. Is there a little bit of Paul Robeson in that? But talk about how spirituals became a part of your repertoire.
Yes, his conversation last night was dedicated to the race, and of course he talked about all races, not just the colored race, but all races, the equality for all the races in the world. He talked about praying for peace amongst people all over the world. Unfortunately, we can't even get that now, but at least, you know, he did talk about it then. And in the words of that I sent you from the Manic Street Preachers, it's written in that, what he was saying about the need to come together as one race. And yeah, he talked about it that night, and I was completely captivated and overwhelmed. And to finish off, he came back to film The Proud Valley. It was released in January 1940, and it was the first ever film ever made in Wales. And I don't know if you know this, but the producers wanted to call it David and Goliath. And he said, no. I have come amongst the people of the South Wales valleys. They are proud people, and this is going to be called Proud Valley. And that's what it was. Did you know that?
Yeah.
You did.
I read it in the material that you sent. I didn't know that.
Oh, there we are. Okay.
I didn't know that.
There we are.
Sherry, you will see, and Cyril's referred to it, the compilation that Jeff has put together that we provided for you, which is our tribute to that. It combines the two of the three elements anyway, certainly that Cyril has mentioned. One is the recording of Adele Nile, which was performed by Treorchy on the night that they were invited to, and it's also the Welsh national anthem in Welsh. But there is on the tribute, Jeff has done the words in English, which refers to how Paul would have sang it. And the central part, of course, is the Lord's Prayer, where that is very universal. And they are three of our recordings, and hopefully it'll be accepted as such as the tribute from not only Pendyrus, but certainly probably South Wales to the anniversary. Jeff will tell you how we put this together. I give him one or two ideas, and he goes away and makes it real. So I'll pass it over to Jeff now, particularly the last part where he takes in what Cyril mentioned about the Proud Valley.
Yeah. So come back to your first question. The only recording we've made of a spiritual, I believe, is My Lord, What a Morning. That's a kind of thing we have done others, but we don't have anything that we can, share musically wise. But as Graham pointed out, you contacted the choir, and Graham kind of hospital passed it to me, and I was thinking, one of my favorite films was Showboat, and Old Man River. That's I first sang that with Dowlice, and we do have a recording of that sung from 2012 on our YouTube site, and it was the attraction of the low voices. I've always been get as far away from the tenor section of the high voices as possible. And when I was looking at what we could do, I looked through all the connections that we could find, and we just happened to have finished recording our new CD. I said, you mentioned it, Ellen. So we thought Paul's influence over the South Wales and the Wales in general area, it was just too big to fit in one song. Mm-hmm. So I thought, let's start with something similar. Adele and I was referring back to that concert. You got to stick the Lord's Prayer in the middle of it, and then each sang the anthem. So the compilation I put together, it's 60 to 80 hours work from it myself, looking, researching.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to stop you. Janice is telling me I'm running out of time.
Yeah, that's fine. But
I thank you. But so, someone in the chat did mention that the Welsh language is a difficult language to learn, and they wanted to know if Paul ever sang it in Welsh. Did you ever sing the national anthem in Welsh?
I did see the question come up, actually, Sherry, but that transatlantic link, he sang all through the night, and he used a number of Welsh words in that, hyd and os, all through the night. So he did pronounce some of it in Welsh.
Okay.
If that's any help to the questionnaire.
And you see the question, are the Edinburgh concerts still held annually?
The Welsh national anthem is held annually, that's correct. But there are Eisteddfods held.
Yeah, Eisteddfodau.
Eisteddfod
yes.
are held in many places throughout Wales, but the main one is the National Eisteddfod, which is held every year.
And there are youth versions of it as well, Iardd Eisteddfod. And as a fact, I mentioned it on the CD. Paul Robeson was the first person ever allowed to address the Eisteddfod in English.
English, yeah.
Right. So I'm going to have a last question I ask everybody. Why did you decide to participate in Paul Robeson's 125th birthday celebration? I know we reached out to you. You could have said, oh, I have other things to do, but you chose Pendyrus to decide that we want to do this. Why did you decide you want to do this?
That's a great answer.
I think I'll tell Jeff why he should be involved, because he's the creative element behind it. I just thought it's the 125th anniversary. I know particularly Cyril's and other members of the other choirs revered Paul, the memory of Paul Robeson and what he did, particularly in the valleys of South, how he identified with it. And I thought, but if I'm going to do it, if we're going to do a tribute, there's not a better subject. That was my view, and I bounced it off first of all onto the management committee, and so, well, it's not going to happen yet, but the other choirs have been invited. But I think we could do something. And then when I meant we, I meant Jeff. So I incorporated Jeff into that, and for the in-depth conversation that's gone on this evening, I'm eternally grateful to Cyril, because I'm a little bit younger than Cyril, but and didn't have that experience. Although I was 11 at the time, I could have gone down to Puthcall and maybe squeezed into there, but I didn't have that, and it's enlightening for me. But that story that our archivist Cyril has got is it's a minefield of information, that man.
Go ahead, Sarah. You want to give us some lasting thoughts?
Yeah, indeed, because my knowledge of Paul Robeson goes way back beyond Graham and Jeffrey, and I became aware of him personally through the lady I mentioned earlier on, Martha Edwards, where Paul had stayed with her uncle. And I knew Martha Edwards. She was a chartered physiotherapist, pediatric physiotherapist in one of the local hospitals. And I'm a retired paramedic, and so I spent a lot of time with her, and I was fascinated by the whole story of Paul Robeson. And I have forever been so involved with the story of Paul Robeson. I've gone to whatever exhibition has been held in the local area to listen to people who talk about Paul Robeson, to see some of the things that he did on behalf of because of course he was a barrister, wasn't he? He was a practicing barrister. And yes, there was an exhibition some years ago held in the National Museum of Wales where they told the whole story of Paul. And I spent 2 days down there listening to the soundtracks and the images that they had. And so he's always been close to me, not physically, but from a distance, in the knowledge of what he achieved as a man. And what he did for the colored people of United States and in this country. And so, yes, my time goes back to 1958, and I love the whole story about Paul Robeson. And who knows if Graham convinces the MD to sing Old Man River, I'll do the solo for you.
Okay, did you want to say anything, Jeff, or?
I think they have basically summed up everything that can be done. I'm just the technical guy at the back end of the things who puts things together when instructed to or asked to.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure working on this project. And said, I've always loved his voice anyway, and it was really nice to get a chance to put this tribute together that we put together.
Yeah,
I do want to mention one last thing. This was Cyril said, because we always think of Paul Robeson and Welsh people in the past. But what Cyril has told me is that there are at least one group of young musicians called the Manic Street Preachers who have recorded a song. They recorded in 2001 called Let Robeson Sing. And this is an alternative rock band. Just very briefly, Cyril, just talk about how Paul Robeson has transcended generations.
It obviously is history as reflected in these young men searching out some history of Paul Robeson and putting this together. Now, I wasn't made aware of this particular track of music until yesterday.
Oh, is that right?
And so it came to me yesterday, and I thought, what an opportunity to mention it to you today.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's a track that's really worth listening to, and I'm hoping I can get it onto a CD.
Yeah.
Graham, Jeff.
All right, that's,
And maybe
I
we
think
can.
Sherry, in answer to your question, that actually, the fact that the Manic Street Preachers have written the song about the man, it just shows the reverence that he's held in South Wales, generational through all the way through. So, I mean, they wouldn't just pick this up and say, I'll pick it up. It's actually in their being, it's all around. And so, therefore, his mark of what he did, as Cyril has eloquently said, of what he's done in the valleys, there's almost a camaraderie around it that likes to identify with a man that did so much. I think it was a pleasure, certainly for me, to see what Jeff put together. And for us, I think, for Pendyrus to take part in and hopefully it'll expand the knowledge, at least what's going on in South Wales now, you know. So no, it was our pleasure to be involved.
and our pleasure to have all three of you here today. I've learned a lot, and some of the things I did know have been enhanced by Cyril's storytelling. I love stories, you know. To me, anecdotes and stories are the way you tell history, because history is made up of characters and people who are doing things. I just want to mention that this interview will be on our YouTube page, and that's where our listeners, our viewers, I guess, can find it. Again, the three of you, Graham, Cyril, Jeff, thank you. And I should mention that, you know, those people who will be attending our Saturday, April 18th, Closing Yellow will hear the Pendyrus Male Choir and a re-recorded performance, but the voices are lovely. And every time I write about you on Facebook, I always put in a link to where people can hear your music, because I think they really need to. And they understand why Paul Robeson was enthralled with not only your music, but the Welsh people. He felt that connection, that link. All right, so I really thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Janice now to lead us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you. Glad to have you here.
Thank you all. Thank you all out there for joining us. And this celebration is international, as you can see. And so we're now signing off. Thank you all for hanging in there with us. Thank you, Tafari, for our technical assistance.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Hwyl fawr.